Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Cannabis-Impaired Driving 2 Student Paper Competition Finalists. My name is Kim and I'm your moderator for this session. I just have a few housekeeping items to quickly mention before we get started. Conference interpretation service is available by clicking on the planet sphere icon at the bottom of your screen to select your preferred language. Please ignore the feed loop language selection in the top right of the screen, in feed loop. Please only use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your video screen to submit your questions and not the chat box below the video or in feed loop. Throughout the conference, we encourage you to post to social media using the hashtag PRI2021. Any post with that hashtag will also appear on the social wall in the lobby. I will moderate a Q&A session after each presentation. And now I'd like to introduce our first presenter. It is Anusha Ranjan with Connect, Not Convince, reaching youth cannabis users with the hashtag Know What Impaired Means campaign. Anusha.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen right now. Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. So my name is Anusha Ranjan, and I'm a Knowledge Translation and Programs Coordinator from Parachute. And I'd like to thank the CARSP PRI conference for having me today to speak on this important topic. So Connect, Not Convince, reaching youth cannabis users with the Parachute hashtag Know What Impaired Means campaign. Great. So for those of you who don't know, Parachute is Canada's national charity dedicated to injury prevention. We work towards a Canada free of serious injuries with Canadians living long lives to the fullest. We pursue this through 4 strategic priorities, including falls, motor vehicle collisions, poisonings, as well as incidents in sports and recreational activities with a focus on concussions. But today's focus will be on road safety and cannabis use in youth. So through the presentation today, I'll be sharing some strategies that Parachute has used to reach our target demographic through the Know What Impaired Means campaign, which is cannabis users ages 15 to 24 and their parents. And then I'll be sharing some key learnings, results, and takeaways of the campaign as well. Okay, so a little background. In Canada, our youth have one of the highest rates of cannabis use worldwide. And among this group, motor vehicle collisions are the top cause of, one of the top causes of unintentional injury, deaths. And a significant number of our young drivers killed in motor vehicle collisions also test positive for drugs or alcohol. So given this urgent need to address cannabis-impaired driving among youth, Parachute launched the hashtag Know What Impaired Means campaign in 2019. So the project is funded by Health Canada's Substance Use and Addictions Program, and it ran from 2019 to 2021. And our main goals were, 1, to create this comprehensive national drug impaired driving awareness campaign focused on teens and young adults, and that is evidence-based. And 2, to also train and provide learning opportunities for professionals who could then use our strategies and key messages with their own work and their own communities. So the campaign had 2 phases that took place throughout 2019 and then the second phase in 2020. And these were the main components of the campaign listed here. And in the interest of time, I'll highlight some, if not most of these. Okay. So one of the first components of our campaign was a national youth survey looking at youth behaviors and attitudes around driving and cannabis use. Some highlights, we see that close to 20% of the youth with a license reported driving within 4 hours of using cannabis. We found that 12% believed it was safe to drive within an hour of using cannabis. So these are just a few highlights of the survey. And then using the results of the survey, we decided to focus the campaign on the gaps in youth perception and behavior. So we applied a harm reduction lens described in this slide, which is a common public health approach for issues related to substance abuse, because we know that youth are using cannabis, so we want to make sure that they're not driving impaired when they do. Okay. So using this harm reduction lens, we applied it to our national campaign, and a big component of our national campaign was to develop an effective social media campaign that's targeted specifically to teens and young adults. So we shared key messages and resources. And in addition to that, we also developed a series of Cannabis, which are like short GIFs and short videos that were available for different social media platforms like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, etc., to really appeal to this young demographic. So one of the common scenarios that we played out through these videos is we put together these scenarios of teens doing things while they were high. So some are listed here: giving your dog a trim, waxing your eyebrows, and they ended up going terribly wrong. And it just provokes that question, if you wouldn't do something like this when you're high, why would you drive high? So these are just some stills from some of those videos. Fortunately, in the interest of time, I can't play them. And then we also put together some YouTube videos as well, some stills here as well. And these were also shared on campus and restaurant digital boards at university campuses as well. Okay. Another component of the campaign was the installation of this impaired light sculpture in Toronto at the CNE, the Canadian National Exhibition, and Nathan Phillips Square. The sculpture, as you can see, is made up of words used to describe what it feels like when you're using cannabis, so high, ripped, lit. And when strung together, as you can see in the red, it forms the word impaired. This was a popular spot for our young demographic to take pictures, and it really did serve as a conversation starter both in person and online when interacting with the photos that people posted. And then we also incorporated our Know What Impaired Means messaging into our annual National Teen Driver Safety Week campaign. This is an annual campaign that Parachute holds every year to educate teens on different safe driving messages. And we incorporated the Know What Impaired Means messaging into the toolkits and activities. And we have schools and communities across Canada that participate in National Teen Driver Safety Week. So this really helped us to amplify our reach of the Know What Impaired Means campaign and messages even further. And then finally, for the second phase of the campaign, we actually included this new component called #HaveThisTalk. And this was a social media campaign and awareness campaign that was targeted to parents, more about them and how they communicate with their teens and their kids about cannabis and impaired driving. It also included some PSAs. This is a still from one of the PSAs. And on our website, we provided a guide and resources for parents on how to have this talk. So we highlighted why to have this talk, what parents can talk about, and again, how to walk through this talk with their teens. So that was a new component for us as well. Great. So those were some of the key highlights of the campaign that I wanted to share with you. And now for the evaluation. So for the evaluation of the project, we looked at reach, effectiveness, and outcome as our measures. So I'm going to share a few highlights of those. So first, for reach, when we're looking at our youth reach, specifically, for the campaign, we had over 80 million impressions for the campaign overall. Now, not all of those 80 million impressions can be distinguished by age group, but based on targeted ads to the 15 to 24-year-old demographic, we know for sure that we were able to reach them through close to 3 million impressions from TikTok ads and close to 12 million impressions from other sources like the campus ads, the influencer posts, the sign views that I mentioned earlier. But overall, 80 million impressions for the campaign. Okay. And then to evaluate the effectiveness of the campaign, Parachute also did a post-campaign survey of Canadian youth. And as part of that survey, respondents were shown a sample of campaign ads, and they were asked how effective they were at actually conveying the messages that we wanted to get across. And as you can see here, between the moderately well to extremely well range, we had 77% of respondents respond, I guess, positively to the effectiveness of the campaign. Okay. And then we also looked at youth attitudes and behavior pre and post campaign around cannabis impaired driving and the ability to drive. And we found that their attitudes around cannabis impaired driving actually remained pretty stable. So this is pre-campaign in the dark gray and then post-campaign in the light gray. And as you can see, it stayed pretty stable that most did agree that cannabis does impair a person's ability to drive. We also found that 2/3 of youth reported that they don't engage in risky behaviors related to cannabis impaired driving. So whether that's driving themselves or being a passenger with a driver who's using. So sustaining this type of majority is important. We know from other issues like seatbelts and alcohol impaired driving that shifts in culture need to be maintained, and we can't let up with this type of messaging in order to maintain this majority. And there's also an opportunity to look at the rest of the youth, so the 1/3 or the 1/4 who do report risky behaviors and attitudes to better understand how to drive change in that group moving forward. And finally, we also asked youth what educational approaches they think were most effective for educating people on responsible decision-making around cannabis. And the top 3 here were public education in stores that sell cannabis, curriculum in high school, and awareness prevention advertising campaigns. One thing I want to note as well is that from 2019 to 2020, there was a statistically significant increase in the proportion who selected cannabis addiction support programs. Great. And as I near the end, a few key lessons learned. The survey confirmed that based on self-report, those who believe that cannabis impairs a person's ability to drive are less likely to engage in risky behaviors. And although we did find that about 2/3 of respondents would be comfortable asking a peer who is under the influence not to drive, there's still an opportunity to build confidence and skills for youth to speak up with their peers. And in relation to the actual campaign, targeted social media was proven to be effective for us to reach our defined audience. We were able to exceed our targets, which is great. And generally, youth do have a positive perception around these types of public awareness campaigns, and they do support other forms of education in school, in stores, etc. So if you are interested at all in seeing any of the resources I mentioned throughout this presentation or the videos, please definitely visit our website, parachute.ca/know what impaired means. And that's it for my presentation, and I'm happy to take your questions now.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make a little question or comment about, I found the slide that said education in schools. That's probably one of the first times that I've ever heard that we actually bring education in schools about cannabis, not just cannabis, but alcohol and other drugs. It's probably being done to a certain degree, but you know, with the legalization of marijuana and youth really being affected, I thought that was it was nice to see that highlighted, and I think it was even better to see that it was brought up by the students.
Yeah.
We have a comment. So Julie says that was a very interesting presentation. Thank you. And another comment from Robert. Thanks, Anusha. What was the most surprising finding?
Most surprising finding, I guess I would say it's kind of not surprising, but also surprising at the same time, is how perceptions didn't change too much post and pre-campaign. And I think I was talking to my colleague about this, that we've done so much work in terms of changing people's attitude that we've now appealed to the majority, and they're kind of on board and understand that cannabis does impair driving. But now we have to figure out how to get that minority who still are, you know, on the fence, aren't really on board yet. And we need to think of targeted approaches. So it was a bit surprising to see that there wasn't too much of a shift, but it also kind of informs our direction moving forward and how we need to target that that minority, but also maintain our messaging to keep that majority, like I mentioned.
Thank you very much, Anusha.
Thank you.
So that's our time for Anusha. We're going to be moving on now. So it's Steve Brown, marijuana use among drivers in Canada. Steve?
Good morning. I just want to say thanks to CARSP and PRI, Desjardins, and all the other sponsors. And I'm going to be talking about marijuana and driving in Canada. Just make a quick adjustment here. There we go. I'm going to just give you a quick overview. I'm going to provide a background on marijuana and driving. I'm going to be discussing the methodology that was used in this study, the results, the conclusions that we drew, and next steps going forward in research on this key issue. Oops. In Canada, while alcohol-impaired driving has declined, at the same time, drug driving seems to be on the increase. And next to alcohol, marijuana is the most commonly detected drug in the blood of fatally injured drivers. Unfortunately, at this time, we understand less about marijuana's effect on driving than we do about alcohol's effect on driving. A key question is, has the legalization of the recreational use of marijuana in October of 2018 resulted in an increase in drivers operating under its influence? And just want to mention that self-reported studies are very useful in ascertaining behaviors and attitudes on drugs and driving. Data on drug driving behaviors and attitudes have been collected as part of TURF's Road Safety Monitor, or RSM. And this survey is administered annually to a sample of about 1,500 Canadians who have driven in the past 30 days and who held a valid driver's license. And we've included questions on drug driving in past surveys, 2002, 2004, 2005, and for the years inclusive from 2010 to 2020. And I just want to mention that questions on drugs and driving will continue to be used in our 2021 Road Safety Monitor, which is going to be launched shortly. The other instrument we used was TURF's National Fatality Database, and this was developed in the early 1970s. And it has been used to produce the annual alcohol and drug crash problem report. And we have reports on alcohol going back to 73, and in more recent years, we have alcohol and the drug crash problem. And this report is relied upon by many organizations in the field. It's been used in several peer-reviewed journals. Indeed, some speakers at this conference have used our fatality database as part of their presentation. And just going to share the results, and it's from two publications. And for those of you in the back of the room, I'm just going to read the titles. The first one was based on our Road Safety Monitor, and it's trends in marijuana use among Canadian drivers, and that was based on our 2020 Road Safety Monitor. The second one, based on the National Fatality Database, it looks at the results of drug tests among fatally injured drivers, and that was a publication called Marijuana Use Among Drivers in Canada, 2000 to 2017. So in 2020, 69% of respondents stated that they were very or extremely concerned about drug drivers. And in that same year, 13% of respondents agreed that marijuana did not impair their driving ability as much as alcohol did. And between 2018 and 2020, we saw increases in a couple key indicators. The percentage of those who drove within 2 hours of using marijuana increased from 3.3% to 4.5%. And for the percentage of those who drove within 2 hours of using marijuana and alcohol, we saw a more modest increase, but we still saw an increase from 1.7 to 2.1%. We also looked at the trends in the percentage of Canadians driving within 2 hours of using marijuana. Now, for the benefit of those at the back of the room, I'm going to read these percentages. The blue line shows the percentage that drove within 2 hours of using marijuana. In 2002, 1.5% of respondents reported doing so. This rose to 7% in 2019, then decreased again to 4.5% in 2020. The orange line it represents trends from a shorter period, but it's the percentage of Canadians who drove within 2 hours of using marijuana and alcohol. And it went from 1.3% in 2015 up to 3% in 2019, and then back down to 2.1% in 2020. So going forward, that's something we're going to have to pay particularly close attention to. And I mentioned before, there's this persistent group who agree that marijuana does not impair their driving as much as alcohol. And over the past 5 years, you can see that there's been that steadfast group. In the most recent year, 13.4% who that thought marijuana did not impair their driving as much as alcohol. I have some good news for you. We're at the halfway mark of our slideshow, unless we need extra time and penalty kicks. Now, if we look at our national fatality database, we have a chart here that shows the number of drivers that were positive for marijuana. That's indicated by the blue line. The orange line indicates the percent that were tested. And the percent that were tested has risen. In 2000, only 40% of fatally injured drivers were tested for drugs. In more recent years, the testing rate has risen to 80%, which is comparable to the testing rate we would see for alcohol use among fatally injured drivers. And due to higher testing rates, we now find about 200 fatally injured drivers per year who were positive for marijuana, whereas in the early 2000s, there were only about 80 or 85. Oops. Now, this is a steadfast chart. It's included in a lot of our presentations. It shows the percent of fatally injured drivers who are positive for marijuana or alcohol. And alcohol is represented by the orange line. And you can see that in 2000, 35% were positive for alcohol. Only 13% of drivers were positive for marijuana. By 2017, that gap had narrowed considerably. 30% tested positive for alcohol, while 20% tested positive for marijuana. In 2017, following fatally injured drivers tested positive for marijuana, 23% of males, as opposed to only 11% of females. And as one may expect, among 16 to 19-year-olds, 42% were positive for marijuana, compared to only 7% of 65 and older. We looked at a 5-year period, and we found that the following fatally injured drivers were positive for marijuana. Users of safety equipment, those drivers or motorcyclists, that were using seat belts or helmets, 17% were positive for marijuana use. But those non-users of safety equipment, almost 29% were positive. So that's something to consider when we're thinking about risk taking, as Anisha mentioned in the previous presentation. Vehicle type, 20% of automobile drivers were positive for marijuana, as opposed to 7% of commercial vehicle drivers. And if we look strictly at those drivers in the 5-year period that were positive for marijuana, only 30% of those drivers were positive only for marijuana. Another 29% were positive for marijuana and alcohol. And the remaining 40% of drivers were positive for marijuana and one or more other substance, or it could be alcohol in addition to CNS depressants, CNS stimulants, and narcotic analgesics. So we are seeing some substantial polysubstance use there. I just want to quickly share some 2018 preliminary data. We have data from 8 jurisdictions, which represents 75% of Canada. And in 2018, 21.7% of fatally injured drivers were positive for marijuana. This is up slightly from 20.4 who were positive the previous year. And then we looked at the pre-legalization and post-legalization period. In the pre-legalization period, 22% were positive for marijuana, while 19.8% were positive in the period from October 17th to the rest of 2018. However, if we look at 16 to 19-year-old fatally injured drivers, 32% were positive in the pre-legalization period, while 43% were positive in the period after that. And here's a chart showing the percentage of fatally injured drivers that were positive for marijuana by crash month. And you can actually see that January, February, March were the months in which the highest percentage of drivers tested positive for marijuana. So I don't think there's a group of drivers that were sitting around waiting for marijuana to be legal before they went out and drove after using marijuana. And you can see towards the end that it's 19.8% in the last 70 days of 2018. So in conclusion, among survey respondents, there are those who believe that they don't believe marijuana impairs their ability to drive as much as alcohol does. And fatally injured younger drivers are more likely to test positive for marijuana than older drivers. And among the drivers in our survey response group and fatally injured drivers, the trends are showing decreases in alcohol use while we're seeing increases in marijuana use. And as I mentioned about polydrugs, alcohol use is common among those who have also used marijuana among both survey respondents and fatally injured drivers. Going forward, although I'm working from home, I'm still going to continue having a look at the data while I look after other domestic duties. We're going to monitor both indicators, the survey responses and the fatally injured drivers. And we're going to be using the historical data to compare the post-legalization era of recreational marijuana use. So we'll have more than 70 days to talk about going forward. And we're going to look at trends for subgroups, which can help when tailoring education and awareness campaigns. And we're also going to take into consideration rates of polysubstance use when implementing countermeasures. Want to thank you for listening in, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask me now, or you can visit the turf booth at the exhibit area, and you could ask questions there or find out more about turf and the research we're doing. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Steve. Your last picture with your dog and your lawnmower made me smile this morning, so I appreciate that. We do have one question from Julie Martineau. Does the research into the occurrence of drugged driving take into account the greater scrutiny afforded to cannabis-impaired driving since legalization, as well as better screening methods of impaired drivers?
Yes, well, as I mentioned, the post-legalization period is relatively short, and you know, we have taken into account the increased scrutiny because, as I mentioned before, the testing rates have improved, and we've looked at percentages of the tested drivers. So you know, we're not just looking at the absolute numbers, but we are looking at the percentages of those testing positive for alcohol and drugs as well. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, and thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
So now we're going to move on to, those were our two cannabis impaired driving presentations for today. Now we move on to the student paper competition finalists, and our first one's going to be Mingjian Wu. Mingjian, if you want to turn on your screen. Safety evaluation of the citywide installation of driver feedback signs.
Hello. Okay, I think my voice is can be heard now. Okay, let's just get started. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for attending the session of my presentation, which is titled by the Safety Evaluation of the Citywide Installation of Driver Feedback Signs. My name is Mingjun Wu. I'm a PhD student from University of Alberta, and I want to acknowledge my research advisors, Dr. Taejun Kwon and Dr. Krimel Pasuni, for providing me support and guidance all the way along this project. So here's what I'm going to talk about today. In general, all the content is split into four parts. Firstly, I will start with introducing the background of this research project, including the study objectives, data description. Then I will focus on the safety evaluation of the driver feedback signs in the part 2. And moving forward to the part 3, I will give a brief description of the program implementation strategy of the driver feedback signs. Since this is not the focus of this presentation, I won't spend too much time in this part. And finally, I will give a conclusion summarizing all the findings and contributions. So before I get started, let's think about one question. Are we safe, or are we really safe? So I found these statistics from International Transport Forum, and this is the comparison of the road fatalities per 100,000 population in 2015. The yellow bar here is Canada, where the red line here is the average level among all the involved countries. Yes, we are under the average level, but we are very close to that. And this is definitely not a good indicator saying we're safe. So I would say we're in the middle level, but more work is needed to improve the road safety. Among all the collision types, speed-related collisions occupies a huge proportion, and its seriousness is often underestimated. Statistics show that within all the fatalities and injury collisions, speed-related collisions account for 27% and 19% respectively. Therefore, to improve traffic safety, reducing the speed-related collisions is definitely needed. In 2015, the city of Edmonton adopted Vision Zero and approved a series of safety strategies to make a safer street through safer speed. And the city adopted the speed management continuum and uses a variety of speed control countermeasures, such as the intersection safety devices, ISD, mobile photo enforcement, MPE, and the driver feedback sign, DFS. Lots of research have already proved the former two countermeasures are capable of improving traffic safety in intersections in the roadways respectively, where the research on DFS is relatively limited. Compared with the ISD and MPE, DFS has a better perception from people and is believed as a more cost-effective countermeasure in improving roadway traffic safety conditions, and thus the city is willing to expand the DFS program. So what is a DFS? Here's a video showing how a DFS works, and this video was taken in the city of Edmonton. As we can see, when a vehicle is approaching to a DFS, the real-time speed will be displayed in the board, and if the vehicle is exceeding the speed limit, then this number will be flashing, and it won't stop until the vehicle reduces its driving speed down below the speed limit. So a DFS is often paired with a speed limit sign on the top, a dynamic speed display board, and also radar speed detector. There were lots of research being conducted before on whether DFS is effective in reducing vehicle speeds, and the results consistently proved yes, it is. Based on the observations of the speed changes in the city of Edmonton, DFS can lead to speed reduction between 6 to 11 kilometers per hour in different treated sites. With knowing this, you've probably had the idea that, oh, DFS is very good for traffic safety and we can put more money on it. But the fact is, we don't know how many collision frequencies can be reduced because of the speed reduction. And there was almost no research conducted before with regard of it. So one of our objectives is to address this gap by exploring the safety impact of DFS. The project is split in two phases. The first phase is of the safety assessment, within which the safety evaluation was conducted to see whether DFS can actually help us to reduce the collision frequencies. And this is a core part of the entire project. And after that, economic analysis was taken to investigate if DFS is indeed a cost-effective intervention that worth further investment. And after the phase 1, we move forward to the phase 2, which is the citywide DFS implementation strategy. And in this phase, we develop a site selection framework for benchmarking the existing DFS deployment as well as recommend future expansion plan. However, as I mentioned before, the phase 2 is not the focus of this presentation, so I will only give a brief description of the phase 2 for showing the outcomes. So before I go to the methodology part, I want to describe the data we've used in this project. Firstly, we will provide all the collision records happening in Edmonton between 2009 and 2018, and also the raw data sets of the traffic volume within this 10 years time period. These are all in Excel files. We then do some process of them and convert or incorporate this data into the shape files. And after that, we utilized a widely used GIS platform, ArcGIS, to do the following data process and analysis. So let's go to the first part of the phase 1, the safety evaluation. To investigate the safety effectiveness of the DFS, we adopted one of the most widely used methods, called empirical-based method, with establishing safety performance functions, SPFs. I won't go into too many details of it, but this method is effective in counting for the regression to mean artifacts, and also can capture the nonlinear relationship between collisions and the traffic exposures. To simplify the concept behind it, this method not only considers the treated sites, but also all the untreated sites as a reference group. Then we calculate the expected collision frequencies will happen if there was no DFS installed. These collisions are called before period collisions. We compare it with the collisions that actually happened after DFS installed, and this is so-called after period collisions. And in this way, we can calculate the before and after collision reduction for each site, and also the citywide overall reductions. So we repeat this method in different collision severities, the collision types, and obtain the following results. The bar chart here, the white number represents the collision reduction ratios, while the yellow numbers represent the t-tested results, indicating the statistical significance of the reductions. If this value is greater than 1.96, then it means this change is statistically significant. And in this figure, we can conclude that DFS has a great impact on reducing collision frequencies, especially for the speed-related severe collisions. And the reduction for that type is about 45%. So we move on to the economic analysis of the DFS program. After the evaluation work is done, economic analysis is taken to calculate the benefit-cost ratio we can expect from it. Basically, we converted the reduced collisions into monetary values and use it to divide the implementation cost of the DFS. If the ratio value is greater than 1, it means we can benefit more than the cost out of this combination. Here are the results. We used 3 different criteria to conduct the economic analysis, and they're showing that DFS is a high cost-effective countermeasure, as all the benefit-cost ratios are greater than 1, with most of them are even double digits. And that is why we can consider to invest in more DFS in the city. So all the results of the phase 1 regarding the safety assessment of the DFS program have been presented, and then I will walk you through the results that we've obtained in the phase 2 of this project. Since we already proved that DFS is a cost-effective countermeasure and worth for the expansion, basically in this phase, we're trying to figure out where to locate the DFS so that we can maximize the return of our investment. We firstly consider how much safety effectiveness we can obtain from the implementation of the DFS program, and also the coverage of vulnerable road users, including senior residencies, schools, playgrounds, and bus stops. This is the objective function for this part by combining the safety effectiveness and the coverage of vulnerable road users and facilities. A weight value is proposed to adjust the importance between these 2 factors. Transportation agencies can trade off based on their practical needs and concerns. When the weight value is set equal to 1, which means we will only consider the safety effectiveness. When the weight value is set to 0, which means we will only consider the vulnerable road users and facilities. Well, if the weight value is set to 0.5, which means we will be equally considering both. With the objective function set, we employ the greedy algorithm, which is one of the intelligent algorithms, to search for the optimal locations for the all-new and expansion scenarios. Here, the all-new scenario is to hypothetically relocate all existing DFS in the network to assess the current deployment and benchmark the system optimal strategy. While the second scenario is expansion scenario, which can determine the optimal locations for the future DFS or the new DFS with considering all the existing ones. These are the results of the all-new scenario with the 3 weight values. As expected, the spatial distribution of the selected sites is more clustered with the increasing of the weight values, since we are placing more and more importance on the collision reductions. By contrast, if the weight value is equal to 0, the spatial distribution will be spread out to cover as many vulnerable facilities as possible. If the weight value is equal to 0.5, the spatial distribution is kind of between. We also check the percentage change of the 2 factors versus the change of the weight value. As the weight value increases from 0 to 1, the collision reductions can be increased as well. By contrast, the coverage of vulnerable road users and facilities will be decreased. We also check the street views of the selected sites just to make sure they're reasonable. This is an example of the weight value being equal to 0.5, and we can see some of the sites are located near schools, playgrounds, and senior residencies, while some of them are located in the downtown areas where the collision frequencies are higher than others. And this slide shows all the results of adding 10 or 20 more DFS by considering different concerns. This is not saying we can only add 10 or 20, but only an example showing the visibility of the expansion scenario. And this is the statistics change in percentage of the expansion scenario, which has the same pattern as we saw in the all-new scenario. And again, we check the street views of them. Those selected sites are expected and pretty reasonable. So in conclusion, based on all the findings of this project, significant reductions were found for all collision types and severities, with the highest percentage for severe speed-related collisions. And the DFS program has huge societal benefits in terms of collision cost savings, with double-digit benefit to cost ratios. The economic analysis indicated it is worthwhile to invest in installing citywide DFS in urban areas. A framework that allows for the future expansion of DFS locations was proposed based on the potential safety effects. Overall, the results confirmed the effectiveness of driver feedback science in improving road safety. Apart from all the findings we've got, we also found out that there were some other potential research areas we can explore in the future. We already proved that DFS can improve the safety performance, and yes, the benefits we can get from them will be increasing as more and more DFS being added into the city road network. However, the marginal effect of it will be decreasing as well. Due to the limited budget and manpower, it is worthwhile to determine how many DFS we actually need in the city and how we can deploy them to obtain the optimal benefit. And secondly, the combined usage of countermeasures is likely to give us better effectiveness. So how to properly implement all the 3 countermeasures together so that we can achieve an optimal effectiveness will be another topic we can investigate. So the main part of this presentation is almost done. I also want to highlight that our work out of this DFS project are well recognized by various academic and industrial institutions. So we have generated 4 papers so far out of this project. 3 of them have been published already, while the other one is close to be published. And myself and my research advisors have been invited to present our outcome of this research in a lot of locations as well. And last but certainly not the least, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the City of Edmonton's Traffic Safety Section for their financial support and providing me the data. And also thanks for the event host, Canadian Association of Road Safety Professionals, for providing me this opportunity for showing my research works. Thanks very much. And now I'm open to answering any questions on the work.
Thank you, Mingjian. We have one comment from Teresa Ann. Congratulations for this study. With its life-saving possibilities, I wish you the best of luck in its implementation.
Thank you very much.
So if there's no other questions, we will move on to our next paper. Milad Delavery.
Yes.
Good morning. I'll just read you. It's characteristics of paramedics collision in a metropolitan area of Quebec, a Bayesian network analysis.
Hello, everyone. My name is Milad Delavery. and from University of Quebec at Chicoutimi, and today I am going to present a paper about the characteristics of paramedics collision in the metropolitan area of Quebec, and we use Bayesian network analysis for this study. And you can see also other co-authors here as well. First of all, for going to this study, we want to talk about the problem of this study. And this is the paramedics collision, which is high, allowing non-injuries, and their important job in this regard. So let's take a look at the Canadian road collision statistics. Canadian motor vehicle mortalities are almost about 1,762 in 2019, which is 9% reduction, fortunately, from 2018, which is about 1,939. And from all of these mortalities, it should be mentioned that 2% of all workers that these studies are related to the traffic injuries related to workers involved in road collision lead to almost 25 to 30% of total mortalities from 2000 to 2008 in Quebec workplaces. And in this category, just the workers who are between 25 to 35 years old exhibited 28% of these total cases. And the study shows also that the risk for paramedics are 5 times higher than other drivers. And also it should be mentioned that for our study, the current study, the paramedics collisions in Montreal result in 64 injuries and 1,402 non-injuries between just 2010 to 2012. As I said, most of these collisions are non-injuries. By knowing these statistics, so what is the objective of this study? The objective of this study is knowing the characteristics and factors involved in paramedics collisions, which is like paramedics experience, gender, age, and etc. And for this aim, we want to use Bayesian network analysis and also descriptive analysis for our data, which is between 2010 to 2012. And the methodology that we use in this study would be used data collection and preparation from Origin Santé from Montreal Island, and also descriptive analysis from those studies and using Bayesian network modeling to know whether the results of descriptive analysis confirm or not. As you can see here, this is a general data, which is collisions collected from Origin Santé and also SAG from Montreal Island from 2010 to 2012. And it shows that if you look at, for example, this plot, which is the number of injured people per year, from 2010 to 2012, number of injuries increased. But fortunately, the number of injuries reduced during these years. And also, if we calculate the number of injured people per paramedics with the year from 2010 to 2012, it shows that, yes, the number of injuries per paramedics, per one paramedics reduced. And also, the number of non-injuries per paramedics increased, but for the last 2 years, it's almost the same and equal. So kind of monotonic trend. And as I said, we use the data from Origin Santé and SAG. So these are 2 different sources, and we collected our data from these 2 sources, and also we compared the accuracy of the data, which is high. And it should be mentioned that the number of injuries reported equal to SAG is 11 out of 64, and number of injuries reported in origin santé, which is less than SAG, is equal to 32 out of 64, which is almost 50% of our data. And this is related to the along, which is we can mention, for example, the injuries after 30 days after the accident. And also number of injuries not reported in origin santé is equal to 15 out of 64, and less interesting categories are 6 cases out of 64, which is not high. Let's go to the data description of our data. You can see the vertical axis here is percentage and the horizontal is liability. And for example, the first plot you can see here is female involved in collisions and male involved in collisions. And here is obvious that female are more involved in collisions with respect of the liability. I mean, in those collisions that the females are responsible for the collisions. And the drivers who are less than 25 years old are liable for the collisions. And then after that, drivers between 25 to 45. And also drivers who have less experience, less than 10,000 hours experience, I mean, low experience, have higher liability compared to drivers with more than 10,000 hours experience. And also the liability of the collisions of paramedics in different road surface status are here, and you can see that in snow and icy, let's say, situation, the responsibility of the collisions for paramedics increase compared to others. And also in waiting areas, which this plot is related to the collision location, in waiting areas, the liability is more than others. And for the signalization variable, the situation that there is no signalization, the liability increase compared to other situations. I mean, like street light and green light is priority. And also, in situation with green light and with priority, compared to other situations, the non-liability for paramedics collisions is high, which is really good. And also for the veering seatbelts, it shows that unknown situation, there are high number of liability. We use, as I said, we use Bayesian network analysis for our study. First of all, we convert continuous to discrete data and then finding significant variables with using correlation, and then checking the multicollinearity with a minimum explanatory variable, and then choose the test and train data. And after that, we made our whitelist and blacklist for linking the explanatory variables, and also between explanatory variables and response variable, and for that we use expert opinion. And then after that, for choosing the best DAG, we use COD2, which is a score-based algorithm for choosing the best and optimize the DAG. And after that, we measure the accuracy of our Bayesian networks with ROC curve. And all in all, we use BNLearn package in our software in our study. So let's go to the results section. For the results section, as you can see here, the Bayesian network DAG for the paramedics collisions, which is, for example, here, seatbelt experience regime based on the Montreal Island hour of the day and date of the days of the week, and also states surface and pavement condition are directly contribute and relation with responsibilities. And also you can see rod curve for the different categories of responsibility, which is yes, no, and shared. And here you can see that the TP rate are more than FP rate, so the accuracy is acceptable for our study. And for the results section, which is related to the inferences that we get from Bayesian network, we can see that, for example, in table 1, the Bayesian network probability inference per gender variable and driver responsibility. And it shows that, yes, female are more responsible than male based on the inference probability, but it's not a lot and it's not significant. So the difference is not significant. But for the ages drivers who are less than 25 and between 25 and 45 are the probability of being responsible is more than drivers who are more than 45 years old. And also low experienced drivers have a high chance of being involved in collisions and liable for the collisions also. And also here you can see the inference probability for the different cities of our surface in the Montreal Island. And in this case, it's obvious that after dry conditions, snow and icy surfaces safe condition have higher chance to be involved in collisions with responsibility for paramedics. And also here for the seatbelt, for the BN probability inference per seatbelt and driver responsibility, it shows that in the situation that the drivers do not use seatbelt or the situation is unknown and we don't know the situation whether seatbelt they use or not, the probability is more than other categories for yes responsibility. And also for the days of the week, it shows that on Friday and also the day between, for example, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. in the middle of the day afternoon, the probability of having and involved in collisions are more than other situations. Let's discuss, as I say, the age and experience of drivers can increase the responsibility of emergency drivers and the potential, and the drivers between 25 to 45 years old age group may increase the collisions. And also males, although males were more involved in collisions than female, but the percentage of responsibility for female is higher than males. And also Bayesian network shows that there is no significant difference between paramedics responsible to gender-wise. And as I told you, cases with unknown seatbelts are higher, and we should have a specific intervention tailoring this case. And also Friday and Saturday, as well as the time between 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. Between this time, we have a riskier situation for paramedics, and this may be due to more calls received by urgent Sunday. And it should be mentioned that by all of this information, when an ambulance is involved in a collision while transporting a patient, it heavily increases the risk of having injuries or deaths. And then for the conclusions, this study highlighted the significant factors attributed to the paramedics' responsibility in collisions with descriptive analysis and Bayesian network. And it should be mentioned that proactive measures should be done for younger drivers with low experience, and also updating the policies and having training and educational program for paramedics. And also we can use driver assistance and new technology in this case. Thanks for your attention. I'm here for questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Milad. It was a very interesting presentation.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So next we move on to Mariam Hanaspour with an assessment of Vision Zero treatments, providing equitability for pedestrians. leading
Yes,
pedestrian interval case study.
yes, but I can't start my video.
Oh, there you go.
Can you see myself as well?
I can't see you, but I can see your screen.
I think the host should let me to share my video. Okay, great, thank you.
There you go.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mariam Hassanpour, a first-year PhD student in transportation engineering under supervision of Dr. Prasad. Today, I want to share with you one of our studies called Assessment of Vision Zero Treatments, Providing Equitability for Pedestrians, considering leading pedestrian intervals as case study. Hope you find this presentation useful. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration in 2019 disclosed that pedestrian fatalities have increased on an unusual scale since 1990 in North America. This is also a concern in Canada, which is among 7 industrialized nations where pedestrian deaths are on the increase. It seems natural, therefore, that pedestrian countermeasures features prominently in Vision Zero programs in Canadian cities. These countermeasures generally target the complex interaction between pedestrian and vehicles at signalized intersection. Leading pedestrian intervals is one such countermeasure proposed as a cost-effective solution by providing a temporary separation between pedestrian and automobiles. Based on logical consideration and evidence from real-world studies, the safety benefits of LPI is undisputable. However, there are fundamental questions that need to be addressed to foster the optimal development of this strategy. First, can significant safety benefits for pedestrians be achieved while maintaining a satisfactory operational level of service for vehicles? Second, what are the application circumstances most conducive to achieving the greatest safety benefits for pedestrians? And third, how can a jurisdiction effectively assess the treatment to achieve optimal development? The reviewed crash-based studies quantified the safety effects of LPI for different number of signalized intersections in different cities. Controversial issue for the first study is considering the same LPI interval of 3 seconds, while traffic and pedestrian volumes varied significantly from site to site and over the course of the day. In addition to the safety evaluation in this study, an economic analysis compared cost of pedestrian vehicle crashes with the cost of implementing the LPI and determined that LPI was highly cost effective. However, potential increase in vehicle delay were not considered. Interestingly, the second study has been done in situations that some case studies entirely prohibited right turn on reds, while others allowed this movement. Other studies evaluated LPI based on video-derived conflicts, which led to very useful results. The first study suggested that LPI couldn't improve pedestrian safety in the suburban environment without prohibiting right turn on red. The second study suggested considering the influence of factors such as road condition, pedestrian volume, the left turn traffic volume, and different values of LPI interval for future research. Increased vehicle queue and delays after applying LPI are expected to play an essential role in operational effects of the treatment. However, little research has focused on the implementation of LPI on operations. Sanay-Nejad and Lowe proposed a suitability assessment checklist for LPI in the city of Toronto that considered the impact of the treatment on vehicle delay and level of service. Sharma and his group considered the cost that means delay, and benefit, that means safety, of LPI using quantitative metrics to examine the success of implementing an LPI and offered a guideline on whether or not to use an LPI on an intersection. The literature review indicated that there is a precious little information on the influence of site features and LPI implementation circumstances on both the safety and operational effects of LPI. Therefore, this study is an exploratory one that aimed to address this need, also provide a blueprint for jurisdiction to optimize the development of LPI installation. Microsimulation was used to estimate delay and vehicle-pedestrian conflicts for 2 scenarios at 3 intersections. Scenario number 1, with LPI implemented, and scenario number 10 without LPI implementation. For one of these intersections, a similar evaluation was done for 8 more hypothesis scenarios that were defined based on indication from previous studies of the potential influence of factors. Microsimulation was selected as a method for this investigation over crash-based or video-derived data analysis, since, first of all, a large database is required to assess the application circumstances to achieving the greatest safety benefits, a problem that is exacerbated by the paucity of pedestrian collision and high cost of video-derived data. Second, field measure data can't effectively capture changing site characteristics for evaluating the efficiency of LPI. And third is that microsimulation is most appropriate for evaluating safety and operational measures for scenarios that may be contemplated but don't exist. Operational evaluation, the vehicle delay incurred due to LPI implementation was measured by creating a layout in PTV vSpro containing all relevant parameters, as you can see in the figure. The PTV vSpro implementation of LPIs requires no additional signal phases to model exact LPI operations for the traffic controller. Actually, in vSpro, LPI can be mimicked by utilizing the delay vehicle green parameter. Using this software, excuse me.
Yep.
Yeah, you paused?
No, it should be working.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I faced an error that you paused my screen. Okay, I will continue. Using this software, the level of service, vehicle delay, and maximum queue length can be calculated for each scenario. In order to measure the number of conflicts, PTV vSim was first used to develop a simulation of pedestrian and vehicle for each scenario using the intersection file developed on vSpro. Second, the surrogate safety assessment model was created to automatically identify, classify, and evaluate traffic conflicts from output of vSim. Some identify conflicts based on 2 measures as illustrated in the diagram: the maximum time to collision, or TTC, and the maximum post-encroachment time, or PET. TTC is originally defined as the time that remains until collision between 2 vehicles would have occurred if the collision course and speed difference are maintained, and PET defined as the time between the moment that the first road user passes a certain point and the moment that the second road user reaches that point. It was decided to conduct the evaluation of the City of Toronto intersection with high pedestrian volume, where LPI has been integrated into signal timing, using the 15-minute traffic volumes at intersection for all modes provided by Toronto Transportation Service Division. A peak hour was identified and traffic volume were calculated for the simulation. This table shows the vehicle delay and level of service and vehicle pedestrian conflicts with and without LPI for these intersection analyzed. As seen, the vehicle delay for the intersection increased when LPI implemented, while the number of vehicle pedestrian conflicts decreased. However, there is a substantial variation in the effect of number of pedestrian vehicle conflicts, suggesting that influencing factor may be at play. Of special importance is the fact that despite the tangible increase in delay, the level of service post-LPI is still on an acceptable level. Different scenarios were defined as shown in the table to evaluate pedestrian vehicle conflicts and traffic delay and level of service from the micro simulation of one intersection. The original condition was taken as a basis for creating other scenarios. The table expressed the result as percent change in delay and conflicts for scenario number 2 to 10 compared to scenario number 1 for Church and Gerard Street. Actually, positive signs in this table indicates an increase and negative sign indicates a decrease. Several observations can be made from the result of the table. First, providing LPI for both approaches, I mean east and west and also north and south in scenario number 8 can increase the reduction in pedestrian vehicle conflicts, but at the same time can produce a high increase in delay that nevertheless still result in tolerable LOS. Increased crossing distance scenario number 6 results in 8% increase in the most severe conflicts, but a negligible effect on delay. And scenario number 5, which refers to prohibiting right turn on red, has a great impact with a 27% decrease in the most severe or serious conflicts and a 28% increase in delay that nevertheless still result in an acceptable LOS. Reducing the LPI from 5 seconds to 3 seconds results in a substantial increase in pedestrian vehicle conflict and logically a notable decrease in vehicle delay. Now some concluding remarks. This study provided a blueprint for optimal development of contemplated LPI implementation. The research was an exploratory demonstration with only 3 intersections analyzed. As such, the results, though interesting and consistent with the literature and logical considerations, are not generalizable. The results do suggest, however, that significant safety benefits can be achieved for pedestrians while maintaining a satisfactory level of service for vehicles. They further suggest that potential LPI developments need to assess on a case-by-case basis, as the effect of LPI can be significantly impacted by influencing factors. The paper illustrates that such case-by-case assessment using state-of-art softwares are doable and can be valuable for optimizing the development of such strategies. Further work could evaluate a larger sample size and variety of intersections and scenarios to make the result more generalizable. Moreover, it may be feasible to quantify in a model the effects of influencing factors. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Miriam. So we had one comment from Teresa Ann. She said, your explanations are so clear that we can understand even without diagrams. So thank you very much for your presentation. I thought you might like to know that. We have a question or a comment from Robert Colonna. Great presentations by all presenters. Thank you again for those who participated in the student paper competition. Exceptional work. Hang on one second. So that concludes for today. Thank you to everybody. Presenters, you can turn on your cameras if you'd like to say one last goodbye. Thank you to everybody who presented today, and thank you to everybody who attended our sessions. Enjoy your lunch, and we will see you in this afternoon's sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.